Hello and welcome everyone to the daily news analysis of 29th of September 2023। तो आज के इम्पोर्टेंट आर्टिकल द हिंदू न्यूज़पेपर से पहले देख लेते हैं। आर्किटेक्ट ऑफ इंडिया से ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन डिपार्ट्स देन फ्री फॉल ए माइलस्टोन इन हिंदू मैरिज रिफॉर्म इन इंडिया रिफॉर्म कैन एड्रेस इंडियाज किडनी ट्रांसप्लांट डेफिसिट should generative artificial intelligence be regulated India inside the digital world of cookies? What is the five eyes of intelligence alliance? Then Swaminathan worked ahead of his time scientific community. Swaminathan wanted women farmers to benefit from MSSRF's research work. Then MG and NREGS social audit unit in a state of paralysis in many states. Then can vaccines reduce respiratory illness among the elderly? Then current account deficit widens QOQ to $9.2 billion on trade gap. Russia to hike its defense spending by 70% 2024. Nipah virus outbreak. What are the monoclonal antibodies? साइंस का पेज है। तो आर्किटेक्ट ऑफ इंडिया से ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन डिपार्ट्स। Mokumbu Sambasivam Swaminathan, popularly known as MS Swaminathan, the legendary agricultural scientist and a key architect of the country's green revolution, passed away at his residence in Chennai on Thursday following age-related issues. He was 98. He was the back-to-back severe drought in the mid 1960s that compelled the political leadership and scientific fraternity to look for solutions to overcome the sea-to-mouth existence. The country was dependent on the food grains imported from the US. Then Dr. Swaminathan worked closely with two agriculture minister C. Subramaniam 1964 to 67 and Jagjeevan Ram 1967 to 70 and 1974 to 77 for the success of the Green Revolution, a program that paved the way for a quantum jump in productivity and production of wheat and rice through adoption of chemical biological technology. Conrad tomorrow, a spokesperson for the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation (MSSRF), said the funeral will take place on Saturday. His mortal remains will be kept on the MSSRF campus in Taramani on Friday for the public to pay respect, recalling his contribution towards ensuring food security. Tamil Nadu Chief Minister N.K. Stalin said the funeral will be held with police honor. Dr. Swaminathan is survived by three daughters. Soumya Swaminathan, former Chief Scientist, World Health Organization; Madhura Swaminathan, Professor, Economic Analysis Unit, Indian Statistical Institute, Bengaluru; and Nitya Rao, Director, NIHD, University of East Anglia, the UK. His wife, Meena Swaminathan, who was Distinguished Chair, Gender and Development MSSRF, died in March 2022. Architect of Green Revolution departs. Born in Kumbakonam on August 7, 1925, to M.K. Kambasivam, a surgeon, and Parvati Hangamlal Swaminathan had his schooling there. His keen interest in agriculture science, coupled with his father's participation in the freedom movement, Mr. Mahatma and Mahatma Gandhi's influence inspired him to pursue his higher studies in the subject. Otherwise, he would have become a police officer, for which he got qualified in late 1940s. By then, he got two undergraduate degrees, including one from the Agricultural College, Coimbatore, on obtaining a postgraduate degree in phytogenetics in 1949 from the Indian Agricultural Research Institute (IARI) in New Delhi. He earned a Doctor of Philosophy degree from the Cambridge. where he met his wife, who was also pursuing higher studies. There he did his postdoctoral research at the University of Wisconsin. In 1954, Dr. Swaminathan joined the Central Rice Research Institute (CRRI), Kotak, and later IARI. In July 1966, he became IARI director. The post held the post he held in till 1972. It was during this stint in his long career that he sought to fame, award and recognition to Dr. Swaminathan, who was a recipient of the Padma Shri in 1967, was chosen for the Raman Magsaysay Award for Community Leadership in 1971. He was awarded Padma Bhushan in January 1972. He became Director General of Indian Council of Agricultural Research (ICAR) and in 1979 was made the Principal Secretary, Union Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation when Indira Gandhi became the Prime Minister again in 1980. He was appointed member Agriculture, Rural Development, Science and Education Union Planning Commission, and for a few months he served as the deputy chairman of the body. Between 1982 and 1988, he headed the International Rice Research Institute (IRRI) Philippines. In 1987, he became the first to get the World Food Prize and the first foreigner to receive the Golden Heart Presidential Award of the Philippines. 2 years later, he was conferred with the Padma Vibhushan immediately after returning to India in 1988. The veteran agriculture scientist established a non-for-profit trust (MSSRF) with the proceeds he got from the food prize. The foundation, which began functioning in the Chennai since 1989, aims to accelerate the use of modern science and technology for agricultural and rural development to improve lives and livelihoods of communities. In November 2004, the Union government made Dr. Swaminathan chairman of the National Commission on Farmers, popularly known as the Swaminathan Commission. The panel's main recommendation to the centre was that minimum support price (MSP) should be at least 50% more than the weighted average cost of production. Dr. Swaminathan was a nominated member of Rajya Sabha from 2007 to 13. The first World Agriculture Prize, instituted by the Indian Council of Food and Agriculture, was bestowed to him in October 2015. Controversies. He had his share of controversy as head of ICAR. He had to bear the brunt of the attack when senior agronomist of the IARI reportedly died by suicide following his non-selection as professor. In March 1978, Jyotirmoy Basu, a tall leftist leader and a member of the governing body of the ICAR, publicly accused the institute of having a one-man show, a charge promptly refuted by the Janata government. More than these instances, Dr. Swaminathan's ethics told him responsible for certain ill effects of the Green Revolution, including ecological damage and benefits of high yield technology, including small and marginal farmers. To this, he responded with the idea of evergreen revolution with emphasis on crop and livestock productivity in perpetuity without ecological and or social harm. Then next step free fall. India must cooperate on the Niger case if Canada provides evidence. India and Canada took their diplomatic row over the killing of Canadian Palestinian activist Niger into the ring at the United Nations General Assembly this week. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar warned that the response to terrorism, extremism, and violence should not be determined by political convenience. In what seemed to be a reference to India's concern over Palestinian extremism in Canada, he added that countries must not cherry pick when to respect territorial integrity and interference in internal affairs, a clear reference to Canada's allegations that Indian government agents were responsible for Niger killing in Swari in June. Canadian United Nations Ambassador Robert Ray appeared to double down on the Canadian allegations as he spoke about the extent to which democracies are under threat due to foreign interference. In effect, the statements reflected the impasse between the two countries more than 10 days since Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made his claims in Canadian Parliament after expelling each other's diplomats. India and Canada have curtailed people-to-people ties, while India has suspended all visas to Canada has put trade talks on hold. These actions have been taken even before Canada has made any evidence of its allegation against the Indian public, and New Delhi has reiterated that despite two visits by Canadian National Security Advisor to discuss the Niger issue, no concrete evidence has been provided, nor has Canada completed its own investigation or begun any trial. Despite this, there have been calls from Canadian high-wise allies that India must cooperate, indicating some pressure from Canada. The only way out is for Canada to take the first step in proving its allegation, which is the absence of a variable evidence seems to have been leveled prematurely. Mr. Jaishankar has made it clear that such judicial interstate killings are not the policy of Indian government. However, it is hard to believe that the leader of one of the most developed countries would make these claims without sufficient cause. And if evidence is shared, the next logical step would be for New Delhi, which has denied the allegation tenuously, to cooperate on any information needed to conclude the Canadian investigation. India's grievances against the Canada for the soft peddling the issue of Khalistan extremism and providing safe havens for wanted terrorism, as well as Canadian claims of rights violation by security forces in Punjab and Indian intelligence operation in Canada date back to 1980s, and these were the cause of their high-level engagements being chosen for decades. However, never before have trade, travel, and tourism ties been cut down so quickly in the past, with students, the business community, and the diaspora feeling the brunt. It is hoped to the two countries move with some urgency to arrest the free fall in ties. A milestone, a milestone in Hindu marriage reform in India. Nearly 56 years after the enactment of the Hindu Marriage Tamil Nadu Amendment Act 1967, young Ilavasaran Ilavarasan from Tamil Nadu never thought that his Suya Maria Thai marriage that was performed and validated under this act could be invalidated and criminalized by the same Madras High Court, which in 1953 the Chidambaram Chettiar versus Devanai Achi had declared such marriage to be null and void since they did not follow the Hindu marriage rituals. Of course, the ground on which resistance to Suya Maria Thai Thirumanam marriage came up is different today. That it was in 1953 when Madras did not have a law to support such radically reformed no ritual marriage among Hindus. On August 28, 1953, quitting Manusmriti, the judges observed that solemnization by the priest and Shatabdi Saptapadi was required for a lawful Hindu marriage and declared that self-respect marriage among professed Hindus were invalid. They were not in conformity with marriages recognized under Hindu laws, and the children born were not legitimate under the law. In another case, in 1958, when Rajathi, who had a self-respect marriage with Delhi has sought court intervention for restitution of conjugal rights, and district court in Tiruchi denied her the rights right on the ground that her marriage was invalid under the Hindu Marriage Act 1955. Instead, the court castigated the self-respect movement for the plight of young women in such illegal marriages, which in the judiciary view had led to denial of their conjugal rights. These interpretations were aimed at discrediting and reformed marriages, which were typically intercaste weddings performed with the objective of protecting women's rights and promoting ideals of compassionate marriage. This judgment led the judiciary and Brahminic Hindus to demean the self-respect marriage practice, labeling women in such marriages as concubines and children born in legitimate. They revealed how some in judiciary mobilized commonly held hegemonic ideals of Hindu marriage practices to counter Dravidian notions of alternative non-Brahminic marriage practices. A basis of the self-respect movement. One of the important claims of the self-respect movement was that all forms of customary and traditional Hindu marriages, mainly the Brahmanical ones, upheld caste supremacy and the patriarchal rights of men. The movement advocated that a man and a woman should enter the dissoluble contract to form a conjugal relationship without conforming to any religious practices. Further, in the context of widely practiced bigamy among Hindu men, the movement advocated the civil registration of all marriages and uphold women's right to dissolve the marriage, remarry, and claim their rights in property. The court, on the other hand, by denying the validity of self-respect marriage, denied Rajati her conjugal rights. Subsequently, in 1969, after the Hindu Marriage Amendment Act in 1967, which legalized the Marathai Thirumanam, Rajati successfully claimed the restitution of her conjugal rights after a new trial. A struggle. The making of this legislation meant a protracted struggle for the Dravidian movement in the Madras presidency, and also at the all India level at the time when the Hindu Code Bill was drafted in 1944, when the Hindu Law Committee headed by B. N. Rao was gathering evidence across presidencies to draft the Hindu Code Bill. The memorandum and oral evidence submitted by the leaders and activists of the self-respect movement demanded not just a few piecemeal changes to Hindu law but also for women's legal rights over all other concerns of Hindus in general. Kunjitham Guruswamy of the self-respect movement argued that the definitions of the Hindu was not comprehensive enough to include all those who did not profess the religion, and that non-religious marriages needed to be recognized under the new Hindu code. Unfortunately, the Rao Committee report of 1947 did not acknowledge these demands. It recognized and affirmed the legal status of Virasabhai Brahmo Samaj, Brahmo Samaj, Arya Samaj, and Prathana Samaj marriage. Thus, the Hindu Marriage Act 1955 granted legal status only to these reformed marriage. Clause 7 of the Hindu Marriage Act of 1955 gave importance to Hindu rites and ceremonies, including the Saptapadi, and to recognize only customary rites and ceremonies such as thali trying and not the non-ritualistic and anti-Purohit Hindu contractual wedding. The unanimous response of Parliament and Judiciary was that the self-respect marriage should be registered under the Special Marriage Act of 1954. This act was passed in Parliament without giving much thought to poverty property rights of couples in civil marriage, which meant separation from the Hindu joint family and denial of the rights over ancestral property. In this case, the case of Chindambaram Chetari versus Devanai Achi, The Madras High Court suggested to the Congress party-led Madras legislature that it take the initiative to legitimize self-respect marriage and protect the property right of the Hindu who had adopted non-religious marriage practices in 1953. The Madras government decided to introduce the Hindu non-conformist marriage registration bill in 1954, but despite it being take up on for consideration was withdrawn and even rejected by the same government on the ground that Special Marriage Act of 1954 would cover the provision for self-respect marriage. In 1959, S.M. Annamalai of the Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam DMK introduced the Madras Suryo Suya Maria Thai marriage validation bill to legitimize self-respect marriage with retrospective effect. It was opposed by Congress legislators, while the CPI and the Praja Socialist Party remained as neutral, leading to the defeat of the bill. The DMK's introduction of the bill in 1965 by S. Madhavan aimed to recognize self-respect marriage under the Hindu law and validate them as a valid Hindu marriage. The DMK argued that the invalidation of this marriage had negative consequences for the wife by seeking legal recognition for self-respect marriage under Hindu law. The DMK aimed to give women the legal right to seek divorce or redress in the case of bigamy, but the bill went nowhere. When the DMK won the election in 1967, the bill was introduced as Section 7A, the Hindu Marriage Tamil Nadu Amendment Act 1967. This act, other than validating all non-ritual Hindu marriage, questioned the Brahmanic interpretation of Hindu marriage. There are still blocks. This amendment was radical enough to trouble the Union government more so in recent years as much as the judiciary was, which was evident in the way they were either rejecting the validity of the amendment or by interpreting the amended act in such a manner that would discourage non-ritual consensual intercaste marriage. Two examples highlight this. In 2017, the Union Ministry for Social Justice and Empowerment, which was awarding intercaste couples, refused to recognize the Section 7 Act and rejected application from Tamil Nadu on the ground that these marriages were not registered under the Hindu Marriage Act 1955. The Madurai bench of Madras High Court had to enlighten the obstinate Union Ministry on the validity of the legislation. Last month, the Supreme Court of the India had to remind the Madras High Court on the validity of Suya Marithai marriage in Tamil Nadu as they are performed without any religious practices and without any public ceremony but through a declaration of marriage in the presence of relative, friend and other persons. However, one must remember that the cumulative effort cumulative effect of legal reforms for women in Tamil Nadu had a far-reaching impact in the various adjudications of Madras High Court, which held far more radical perspective on gender rights in marriage than any other court in India, as in a verdict that related to the registration of a transgender wedding under the Hindu Marriage Act. The reform can address India's kidney transplant deficit. India's organ shortage when India's organ shortage when it comes to kidneys is alarming. In 2022, over 2 lakh patients needed a transplant, but there were about only about 7,500 transplant, about 3.4% due to the prevalence of diabetes, malnutrition, overcrowding, and poor sanitation. There is a high prevalence of chronic kidney disease in India, affecting about 17% of the population. CKD often leads to end stage renal disease, A kidney transplant is often the best treatment for ESRD. Specifically, transplant is often better than alternatives on almost all dimensions that matter: quality of life, patient convenience, life expectancy, as well as cost effectiveness. In contrast to India, the United States and other developed countries could carry out about 20% transplants. Notably, a significant portion of this gap is on account of more stringent regulation in India than a lack of medical facilities. These are poor men ways a patient can obtain a kidney. The first is to get a kidney from a deceased person. This is constant due to a lack of donations. The particular condition required on a nature of death and the infrastructure needed to collect and store kidneys. The second is to request a relative or friend to donate. However, donor and recipient have to be compatible in terms of blood type and tissue type. Such relative friend donors are often incompatible, a case for changes. Thus, regulation for kidney exchange are needed as kidney exchange most often occur across family units, but we argue that these regulations need urgent reforms to on cycle two innovative kidney exchange methods, kidney swaps and kidney exchange. In kidney swap, let us take the example of two strangers, Sunita and Joya, who need kidneys. Sunita's spouse is incompatible with her, and Joya has the same problem. However, if Sunita's spouse is incompatible with Joya and Joya's spouse is compatible with Sunita, swab donation are possible in kidney chain. Let us look at the case of Sunu, who is an altruistic donor donating his kidney with no expectation of a kidney in return. Sunu donates to Sunita, assuming compatibility. Sunita's spouse donates to Joya, and Joya's spouse donates to some other compatible persons, and so on. Our research shows that there are barely any swaps and almost no chain in India. This is because of legal roadblocks, and this is a significant opportunity made with terrible consequences. Considered swab transplants are legally allowed in India with the due permission, but only near relatives are allowed as donor recipients. Pair exception to this restriction as Kerala, Punjab, Haryana, where High Court judgments have recently allowed non near relatives donor recipients pair after verification. Thus, in most states, if Sunita's donor is not near relative, such as spouse, parent, she and her donor cannot participate in a swap. By contrast, it is legal for Sunita's non-near relative to donate to her. These double standard across swaps and direct donations are questionable. Easing the laws for swap to make them on a par with direct donation is necessary. Further, unlike national, regional, and state list for direct transplant for adverts, there is no national coordinating authority for swaps. This is again a huge lost opportunity since larger and more diverse pools make it easier to find compatible swaps. While there are occasionally swaps in India, there are almost no kidney chains fast in all states except Kerala. It is illegal to donate a kidney out of altruism. Thus, one cannot start a chain since one cannot donate without getting a kidney for a family member in return, and kidney from the deceased or a brain dead are only used for direct transplant, not for chain or cycles. The lack of kidney chain is possible an even bigger opportunity missed than swaps. While participating in swaps, families demand nearly simultaneous operation of all donors and recipients since no one wants to lose a kidney without gaining one. But in chance, each patient first receives a kidney and only then does their relative donate. Thus, chains compared to swaps involve significantly lower hospital resources and uncertainty for participants. Needlessly harsh laws regulating swaps and chains have contributed to a proliferation of black market for kidney. Selling kidney to relieve financial distress is a mechanism reference. These Black market endangered all their desperate participants since these operations are conducted off the books without due legal and medical safeguards. At a slow pace, reform of kidney exchange law has been slow. The transplantation of Human Organs and Tissues Act 1994 set the ball rolling by the recognizing transplant possibility from the brainstem death. In 2011 amendment, swab transplants were legalized and a national organ transplant program was initiated, but the national network remained underdeveloped initially. According to the transplantation of human organ and tissues rules 2014, swab transplants are allowed only for near relatives. The government's recent reforms February 2023 allow more flexibility in age and domicile requirements while registering to obtain an organ, but these reforms leave the fundamental unaddressed. This is why it is beneficial to allow and encourage altruistic donation, non-near relative donation for swabs, and to improve the kidney exchange infrastructure. India does not need to innovate in order to reform chains and swabs. Sufficient precedents have been set globally. Australia, Canada, Israel, and Israel, Netherlands, and the United States, among others, now allow altruistic donations. Spain and the United Kingdom have national level registries for kidney chains and swabs. The US has especially made progress in facilitating thousands of swabs and chains. Spain even has international collaboration for kidney exchanges. India's real challenge, therefore, is learn from and replicate the such existing successful regulation to improve the lives of several thousands of citizens. Then should generative AI be regulated? Should generative artificial intelligence be regulated? Generative artificial intelligence is like the proverbial gene out of the bottle. In less than a year, chatbot like ChatGPT, Brad, Claude, and AI have shown what generative AI powered application can do. These tools have also revealed their vulnerability, which has pushed policymakers and scientists to think deeply about these new systems. Should generative AI be regulated? Oral Georgia, George Scaria and Trisha Rice discussed the questions in a conversation moderated by John Xavier, edited experts. What is the legal framework on which generative AI rests? Who owns content? Oral George Scaria. This is an issue being discussed in jurisdiction across the globe, and the different jurisdiction may eventually take different positions on it. So let's start from a jurisdiction that has the most clarity on it, which is the US. If you look at practices of the US Copyright Office as well as the approach taken by one of the US courts in a recent decision, only human beings can own copyright. This means that most of the output generated by AI tools today is outside copyright protection. There is some noise around the need for copyright protection being given to the companies involved in generative AI, but the position that the US Copyright Office has taken is that there will be no copyright over these AI developed works when it is not authored by a human. This is in contrast with India's position. A couple of months ago, an intellectual property lawyer in India filed a copyright registration application for planning. The initial application claiming that the painting was generated by AI alone was rejected. Subsequently, when he filed it as a jointly authored work, the Copyright Office accepted the application. So this is a bizarre situation because we have not had any in-depth deliberation on whether AI-generated works are subject to copyright protection. So the Copyright Office was jumping the gun when they granted joint authorship to work, which was controversy. They issued a And what matters became a controversy. They issued a withdrawal notice to the human co-author, but when I checked the Copyright Office website, it showed that the registration has not been revoked yet. This is a problematic situation. These these two jurisdictions illustrate the kind of complexity in this area. The US is quite ahead, at least one, starting to think about different approaches to how AI would interact with existing copyright law. The US Copyright Office guidance on generative AI only recognizes copyright for works created by people, but AI is little different, so we can see it in different ways. One is where I am just giving a very basic prompt to a generative AI model. For example, I write me a 300 word essay on copyright and generative AI. Here, the AI is doing the most creative labor, but when I, as a prompt engineer, give more detailed inputs and transform what the model has produced, I can arguably apply for copyright. So it is still an evolving debate, and there is no clear yes or no answer. Generative AI is new, at least in public consequences consciousness, not new as a technology. We are still in the first few years of this debate, coming into legal and policy circle, and we are likely to see a more nuanced interpretation over time. How do you see the European Union AI Act in the context of what happening in the US and India? In general, the way the European Union has been regulating emerging tech and AI has been very focused on individual protection against large platforms and companies that dominate the market. I expect that the to be an aspect to be taken into account in the US AI Act well. Another legal tool, the EU Digital Market Act, is designed to level the playing field by imposing interoperability for the so-called gatekeeper platform in the current landscape. When we think about who is building and investing in a large language model and generative AI model, it is heavily concentrated toward a large entity. ChatGPT is backed by Microsoft. Llama is backed by Meta. This is certainly one challenge that the EU AI Act might look into. AGS, I would like to highlight 2 points from the EU AI Act. One, the transparency related obligation. It is trying to bring on in terms of generative AI. For example, it is if something is generated through a generative AI tools, then it need to be tagged as material generated by an AI tool. That's important to suggest to the suggestion to provide at least a short summary of the training. The EU is taking material used which is important from a copyright perspective, whether all this will be successful or not. Whether all this will be successful or not, only time will tell. The EU is taking a risk-based approach wherein they are prohibiting certain kinds of practices and suggesting ex ante assessment for certain others with respect to limited risk ones. They are bringing in transparency requirements. This kind of a graded approach towards risk is important in current context. The EU is taking bold initiatives and initiating discussion at the global level, which is remarkable. Could you contrast the EU graded approach with the US legal framework? The US is taking a far more relaxed approach. I do not know whether it is because they are underestimating the risk involved, whether it is because of their general outlook towards regulation in the specific context of generative AI. I think we are underestimating the diverse risk. For example, in the education sector, you will notice that there is no control on how generative AI tools are used by students, and are there any age restriction, content restriction, and if all platforms have some age restriction, are they enforced? The answer is no. Also, there is hardly any awareness initiative on the potential risk of using generative AI tools in education. To me, these tools have extreme long-term negative effect on critical thinking and the creative capacity of the student, and we are actually working without any kind of guardrails. So we should at least initiate a discussion on a risk-based approach. Maybe we should develop our own indigenous approach to add to the risk. Generative AI is compounding or can compound some existing online threats like the use of deepfakes for disinformation campaigns. This can include simple things like using ChatGPT to make phishing emails sound convincing. There are multiple ways in which is cheaper and more accessible generative AI model can compound issues that we were still struggling to regulate, especially in cybersecurity and online harms. AGS, and these can threaten the basic foundation of our democracy. India is going to have a national election in 2024. As we have been discussing, what will be the impact of this generative AI tool on fair and transparent election? There are hardly any discussion. How do we approach? Although in Indian legal lens, AGS constitutional law provides a certain safeguards against discrimination, but to address this specific issue, we require two things. One, a comprehensive regulatory framework, by which I mean both horizontal regulation that would be applicable across sectors and vertical regulation which are sector specific to. We need more clarity on data protection. If you look at the Digital Personal Data Protection (DPDP) Act 2023, you will notice that it does not apply to any personal data that was publicly made available by the user whom the data relates. This in effect legitimizes all the scrapping that was done by these AI companies. These are the areas where we need to have a more nuanced approach. The DPDP Act has gone through many lives before it was finally passed. It started as something that was supposed to protect individuals from the data collection both by the private sector and the government. It has since taken on a new life as something that more focused on generating economic values. Though it does not hold private entities a little more accountable, individual rights have weakened considerably. But now the expectation is that the proposed Digital India Act is going to fill some of the gaps left by the DPDP Act. At least that's what we have been hearing from the IT Ministry. We will have to see what steps it takes. It would be more advisable to have a learner regulation rather than over regulations. What happens when companies say that explaining their languages models will lead to trade secret exposure? They really on the trade secret regime to guard against disclosure. They are scraping data from across the globe, but they do not want to actually show the details of the training data of the details of that model. But when there is enormous social harms, I do not see any reason why we should not force them to disclose it. They would try to argue that it is a trade secret, but during the pandemic, we saw discussions as to whether there should be a kind of compulsory licensing against trade secrets. I would say that maybe this is one of those instances where a compulsory licensing like regime is a must in view of the broader social consequences. Inside the digital world of cookies. The digital world of cookies plays a significant role in any online experience. In the digital realm, cookies help in personalizations of and user convenience. These on assuming bits of code stored on a device when one visits website play a pivotal role in shaping any online experience. How do cookies work? Think of cookies as the key of a secure number of numbers. secure members only club, just like the club bouncer recognition regular patterns and grants them seamless access. Cookies remember a person login information on websites. This means you do not have to repeatedly enter the credential every time you revisit a site, making it convenient for use on website like Amazon. Cookies remember customers' previous interaction from products they have browsed to purchases they have made. Armed with this knowledge, Amazon serves up tailored product recommendation and content, making the online shopping feel like a personalized bucket boutique experiences. Consider an enchanted grocery chart that never empties, no matter how many times you step away. Online shopping carts fueled by cookies after a similar encashment. You can add items to the cart, leave the website and return later to find all the selections waiting patiently ready for checkout. Platform like Facebook and Google use cookies to track online behavior, ensuring the ads you encounter align with your preferences. While cookies offer undeniable advantages, there is a flip side to considering privacy concern and the potential for data misuse. What are the type of cookies? Session cookies are temporary cookies like post-it notes for websites. They are stored in the computer memory only during the browsing sessions. Once you close the browser, they vanish. Session cookies will help websites remember the action as you navigate like items in a shopping cart. Persistent cookies are the digital equivalent of a bookmark. They stay on the device after your browsing session ends. Persistent cookies remember the login information, language preference, and even the ads you have interacted with. They are handy for more personalized web experiences. Secure cookies are only sent for encrypted connections, making them safer for preying. As secure cookies are often used for sensitive data like login credential. Third-party cookies are similar. They come from a domain other than the one you are visiting. They are often used for tracking and advertising purposes, which can be both useful and at times intrusive. What are the uses of cookies? Cookies here serve a multitude of purposes in the online world. Firstly, they act as digital ID cards, aiding in user authentication by allowing websites to recognize and keep you logged in during the visit. Secondly, they foster a sense of personalization, recalling your preferences such as language choice or website theme. Thirdly, they function as a digital equivalent of a persistent shopping cart, ensuring that items you have added online remain there when you return. Additionally, cookies facilitate website owners in gathering invaluable analytics data about user interaction, enabling them to make enhancement and customize content. Finally, cookies play a pivotal role in the targeted advertising, and as the advertisers use them to display ads that align with a person's interest and browsing history, making online shopping more enticing. Navigating the world of cookies is not all sweetness, but it comes with its set of challenges. What are the challenges associated? Firstly, privacy concerns arises. Cookies could track your online behavior, which while often harmless, can sometimes encroach upon your digital privacy. Secondly, security risk loom when the cookies are inadequately secured, open doors for cybercrimes to pilfer the personal information. Thirdly, the era of user consent has drawn. Thanks to privacy regulation like the General Data Protection Regulation and the California Customer Privacy Act, necessitating website to seek your approval before deploying certain cookie types, resulting in those somewhat in irksome pop-ups and some prompts in India's newly enacted Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023 now necessitates websites to acquire explicit consent from users prior to collecting or processing their personal data via cookies, in contrast to earlier regulations that often accepted implied consent as satisfactory, and the updated law highlights the significance of transparent and well-informed consent. Fourthly, third-party cookies have sparked debates from prompting many web browsers to curb their usage to safeguard user privacy. Lastly, the data delve generated by the multitude of cookies can potentially clog the browser, leading to a sluggish web experience. Conclusively, cookies are both sweet and complex. They play a crucial role in enhancing your online experiences, but they also come with a with privacy security challenges as the digital landscape continue to evolve. So will the cookies will be used and regulated. So the next time you enjoy a warm Gueg chocolate chip cookie. Remember the digital cookies that make your online adventures more personalized, even if they sometimes leave a few crumbs behind. Then, what is the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance? What is the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance? The recent allegation by Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau linking the killing Khalistan leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar on Canadian soil to the Indian government have put the spotlight on the intelligence sharing intelligence Five Eyes, which is believed to have provided the information that helped Canada. Who are the Five Eyes? The Five Eyes is a multilateral intelligence sharing network of five countries: Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the US, and the UK. It is both surveillance based and track signal intelligence SIGINT intelligence of documents shared between the member countries are classified secret. AUS, Canada, NJ, UK, US, eyes only, which gave the group its title Five Eyes. The alliance between the US and the UK evolved around the Second World War to counter the Cold War Soviet threats. The two countries, which had successfully deciphered German and Japanese codes during the war, forged a collaboration to share intelligence related to signals such as radio, satellites, and internet communications. In 1946, the alliance was formalized through an agreement for cooperation and signal intelligence. The treaty, called the British-US Communication Intelligence Agreement of BUSA, now known as UPSA agreement, was signed between the State Army Navy Communication Intelligence Board (STANCIB) of the US and the London Signal Intelligence Board (SIGINT) of Britain. Its scope was limited of communication intelligence matter only related to the unrestricted enhanced for intelligence product in six areas: collection of traffic, acquisition of communication document and equipment, traffic analysis, crypta- cryptan- cryptanalysis, decryption and translation and acquisition of information regarding communication and organization practices, produces, procedures, equipment. Those arrangement was later extended to second party countries. Canada joined in 1948 while Australia and New Zealand became part of the alliance in 1956. Though the intelligence alliance came together in 1940s, it remained a top secret for long. Though then Australian Prime Minister Gough Whitlam did not know about the existence of BRUSA, regarded as one of the most secret agreements until 1973, according to a recent article in Journal of Cold War Studies. In fact, the text of the agreement was first officially released in the public after over 50 years in 2010. How does the network work? Initially, the partners are assigned a respective SIGINT mandate. A Canadian intelligence officer writes in a military journal 2020 that the US is responsible for Russia and northern China, most of Asia, and Latin America. Australia covers southern China, Indochina, and its close neighbors. such as Indonesia, the UK is in charge in Africa and west of Urals within the former Soviet Union, and the New Zealand is responsible for the Western Pacific, while Canada handles the polar regions of Russia. The goalpost of Five Eyes, however, has shifted following the collapse of the Soviet Union and the emergence of new global challenges like terrorism and global influence of China. The Five Eyes have become involved in ocean and maritime surveillance, scientific and defense intelligence analysis, medical intelligence, geospatial intelligence, counterintelligence, counterterrorism, and the continuous sharing of intelligence products via a secret collective database known as Stone Ghost of the Canadian Upper Officer Notes. What are the concerns? There has been several concerns regarding the privacy, security, and the method of working of intelligence alliance, which remained shrouded in history of for long. The alliance was embroiled in a major controversy in 2013 following the disclosure of classified document by Edward Snowden, a former National Security Agency contractor. Mr. Snowden described the network as a supra, supranational supranational intelligence organization that does not answer the laws of its own countries. Swaminathan was ahead of his time scientific community. Indian agricultural scientist and policymaker remember M.S. Swaminathan as someone who worked ahead of time, not just as a scientist, a researcher, and as an academic, but also a visionary administrator. The community believes that developing high-yielding basmati rice variety innovatively innovatively using the technology of a mutation for various crops application genetics for increasing production of our food security and launching programs such as the lab to land where his major contribution to the agriculture sector. Former director general of the Indian Council Agriculture Research Trilokan Mahapatra remembers Dr. Swaminathan as then remember Dr. Swaminathan as an encouraging teacher and a strong administrator. He was our professor at the Indian Agricultural Research Institute. He minded to know words to encourage us when we successfully organized a congregation of scientists. He wrote a letter to the director of IARI congratulating us as students who take pride in perfections. I had met him last on his birthday in August. In all our meetings, he would passionately talk about the research and findings in the fields of agriculture, which was so inspiring. Professor Mahapatra said nutritional quality through mutation of crops, biofortification, funding states to promote agriculture, precision farming, advocacy through National Academy of Agricultural Sciences and establishment of a Central Institute for Women in Agriculture were all his projects. Professor Mohapatra said he remembers insightful papers by Dr. Swaminathan on his doctoral research work in the science of potato in the Nature journal, which is still considered seminal. He joined the Central Rice Research Institute in Kotak when he came back to India after his research. He always had a special consideration for this institute. Professor Mahapatra said his, his stamp is visible in IARI and all other national agriculture science institutions. He said chairman of the Punjab Farmer Commission head and eminent agroeconomist Sukhpal Singh said it was under Dr. Swaminathan's leadership that efforts were launched at the International Rice Research Institute's IRRI cultivate rice with C for carbon fixation capabilities enabling improved photosynthesis and water utilization. Dr. Swaminathan also contributed to developing the world's first high-yielding basmati rice. Professor Sukhpal said, adding that his incomparable contribution in agriculture, involving agriculture Developing world's first high-yielding basmati rice, Professor Subal Singh adding that his incompatible contribution in improving agriculture production by developing high-yielding crop varieties and modern technology would always be remembered by the country, especially by the farmers of Punjab. IRI Director A.K. Singh said in a statement that in the passing of Dr. Swaminathan ends an era of agricultural research and education and extension that was full disruptive innovations. If God appears to the poor and hungry in form of bread, as said by Mahatma Gandhi, that God is Dr. Swaminathan who should be worshipped by the every citizen while taking daily meals, Professor Singh said, describing Dr. Swaminathan dedications to the welfare of farmers as unwavering. Sanjay Deshmukh, professor of life sciences and former vice chancellor of University of Mumbai, said the scientists campaigned the farmer cause, advocating for fair prices, access to technology, and social justice. When the agricultural landscape, his work was a testament to his commitment to improving the lives of those who toiled on the land. His farmers centric approaches resonate far beyond India's borders, serving as an inspiration to agriculture communities worldwide, he said. नेक्स्ट जितने सारे आर्टिकल्स है थोड़ा आप लोग देख लीजिएगा. इन द सोशल ऑडिट ये वाला पर्सन देखेंगे थोड़ा. Can vaccine reduce respiratory illness among the elderly? Then next जो है current account deficit widen QOQ $9.2 billion on trade gap. Then Russia hikes its defense spending by 70% in 2024. Then next जो था लास्ट है मोनोक्लिनिकल वाला, ये थोड़ा देख लीजिएगा. So thank you and we will continue from tomorrow onwards. Thank you all.